This video will discuss what happens in the Season 2 finale of Amphibia, called True Colors, as this Season 2 finale has not yet aired officially. As of the time of my recording this, I am giving you this disclaimer. If you do not want to know what happens in the Season 2 finale of Amphibia True Colors, do not watch this video. Hopefully, the official release will be soon so that I don't have to keep making these disclaimers, and those of you who click away can come back and watch these videos with the knowledge of what happens in the episode. But that time is not yet here yet, so it is what it is. Are we good? Okay, here we go. Season 2 of Amphibia ends with the image of King Andreas, after betraying Marcy, stabbing her when she tries to use the music box to help Anne and her friends get to Earth. She succeeds in this, in that Anne and the planters do go in the portal and go to Earth, but she loses her life in the process, which means that the very last thing Anne sees is her best friend dying before her eyes. When she wakes up on Earth, she is going to have to deal with that image. She might try to deny it and say, oh, Marcy couldn't be dead. She couldn't. I must have just been seeing something that wasn't actually 100% accurate. There's no way she could really be dead. Or she could accept it and have to deal with it. And that would be very hard for her. But even more heartbreaking than this, at least for me, is Marcy's confession that she was the one who engineered their being stuck in Amphibia. She sent a picture to the box to Sasha, who then showed it to Anne, because Marcy had heard the box had magical properties, and she hoped that these stories were accurate. True, she didn't know the box would take them to Amphibia, but she hoped it would take them out of this world. This is because she's lonely, and she's scared, and she's anxious. Her parents are planning to move, and Marcy is this dorky, introverted nerd. She does not have a lot of friends, and she very much values the friendships she does have. She doesn't know what she would do with herself if she lost those friendships, so yes, she's willing to go to extremes to stop that from happening. Marcy's death will, I imagine, be eventually reversed. The easy answer is to say that, of course, it'll be reversed because a lighthearted adventure show like this would never actually kill a character as important to the show as Marcy. And this is true, but the more interesting discussion topic to me is whether the show, absent considerations like that, should kill Marcy permanently, and I say no. With respect to the planters, Amphibia is very much about the relationship between these three young teenagers. If you kill one of them off, you've broken the heart of the show. And it would honestly not quite be as interesting of a watch to me. There are shows that can kill a major character and become stronger for that, and more interesting. But these are shows with large casts. They're very sprawling and sociological. Think of Game of Thrones. If the focus was only on, say, Ned and Robb and Arya, then you would not kill Ned, because then the show would be left rudderless. But because the show is about not only the entire Stark family, but also these other important families, like the Lannisters and the Targaryens, because the show has so many different characters and plot lines and battles and internal conflicts going on, you can afford to kill such an important character as Ned. For a smaller scale show that is more focused on a specific few characters and the relationships between them, it's a different story. For instance, you couldn't have Breaking Bad if you just killed Walter White halfway through the middle of the show. He is so intertwined with the fabric of this show that it would be left rudderless without him. And I think that's the case here, as it is with any show that really focuses on the relationships between a small cast of characters. You can't lose Marcy, just like you can't lose Anne or Sasha. The show is about the three of them. It's not just about Anne. It's about these girls acknowledging the problems in the friendships between them and trying to fix those friendships and becoming more mature and thoughtful and introspective people as a result. That's what the show is. You can't kill a character like Marcy without fundamentally changing what the show is, and thus making it into something that I don't think would be quite as compelling. Now, the obvious rejoinder to this is that, of course, the show can operate without Marcy. It operated without her just fine for a season and a third. And I suppose what I would say is sure, but the show was different then. It was about mostly Anne and the Planters and Wardwood and these lighthearted adventures. I'm not saying there are no character-centric moments, or that it's just entirely fluff, but it is lighter, it is more jovial and more upbeat. There are not a lot of very serious and introspective moments until we get Sasha meeting up with Anne near the end of Season 1. We get a sense of the dynamic between them, what its problems were, and the question becomes, number one, whether Anne, who has grown a lot, can overcome those problems and stop Sasha from controlling her, and number two, what Sasha does in response. As I have said multiple times before, Sasha does not view herself as this kind of villainous manipulator. She is a person who thinks of herself as this kind of knight, this kind of superhero, this person who steps in and fights for her friends and takes care of them and saves them from whatever challenge they're facing. That's what she did when they were kids, as we saw in the flashback in the Third Temple, and that's still how she sees herself. And the idea that Anne views her as this controlling person who doesn't care about her at all, it really hurts Sasha, even if it is true. So you see what I mean, right? The introduction of the dynamics between these human characters, between Anne, Sasha, and Marcy, give the show a lot more depth. They give it a lot more philosophical weight. There's a lot more things to think about, aside from the adventure of the day. Season 2 is a marked improvement over Season 1 because it embraces the tension inherent in the relationships between Anne, Sasha, and Marcy. The bond between Anne and Sasha is my favorite of the show, especially since Season 2 has really worked to complicate that bond. In Season 1, it's really easy to completely take Anne's side and say, oh, she's the victim here, she's being manipulated by Sasha, and she needs to work to overcome the influence of her cruel, callous friend. But in Season 2, it becomes a lot harder to reduce it to something that simple. Sasha very much does recognize her mistakes now. She's trying to improve. She's trying to become a better person. And Anne notices that. And even at the end, when Anne feels betrayed by Sasha because Sasha allows the Toads to take over the city, I mean, what was she supposed to do? Betray Grime? Betray all these Toads that had invested their trust in her? Sasha means no ill will toward Anne. She wants to help Anne. Really, she does. And the fact that Anne feels like their dynamic has not changed, and feels that Sasha is still just this cruel bully, ultimately has negative consequences for them all, because Anne doesn't listen to Sasha when she should, and this leads to a series of events that ends with Marcy dying. I really like their dynamic, and I want to see more of that in Season 3, but admittedly, just playing that dynamic over and over and over again between Anne and Sasha would not be enough to sustain a show this fast. You still have 20 half-hour sections a season, which is a lot. It's much more than just a 2-hour movie. There's a lot of time and space here, so you need a lot of different conflicts. And if you don't want the show to just keep going back into being the kind of adventure of the day stuff we saw back in Season 1, that lighthearted slice of life stuff, then you will need more than just the conflict between Anne and Sasha. So then you have Marcy, and that opens up a whole other series of possibilities. You have the bond between Anne and Sasha, yes, but also the bond between Anne and Marcy, and between Marcy and Sasha. You have a lot of different possibilities to explore. That three-person dynamic is enough to really be the heart of this show, and make it a lot more interesting than the slice of life stuff we saw early on. And even if you do like that slice of life stuff, it's not like we can just return to it wholeheartedly in Season 3. It would ring hollow and honestly feel a bit callous because Marcy is dead. And even if you think, like I do, that she's eventually going to come back, Anne doesn't know that. For her, this is devastating. She's going to have to mourn Marcy. She's going to have to grieve. And so will Sasha. So because we can't just go back to this adventure of the day stuff, and we need enough tension and conflict to really propel the series forward, and because I don't just want the conflict to be simple good guys versus Andreas and his Bugmaster kind of conflict, I do think we need three main characters. We need Anne, Sasha, and Marcy. So yes, I think it would be better for the show if Marcy comes back. So the real question becomes at this point, how do you do that and not have it feel cheap? Not have it feel like you're just contriving drama? There are times, say in more realistic shows, or in shows like Game of Thrones, where the point is very much that mistakes have consequences that can't be walked back from. Then yes, there is a problem with characters suddenly coming back from the dead. But it can be done properly. I would love to see just a lot of time being spent with Sasha trying to revive Marcy. We have not seen a lot of the Sasha and Marcy dynamic. It is probably the relationship I'm most interested to see explored. From what we saw early on, it doesn't seem like the two of them had a strong connection. Doesn't seem like the bond between them was anywhere near as strong as the bond between Anne and Marcy or between Anne and Sasha. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe we're just seeing that through Anne's perspective. And Marcy and Sasha did have a lot more complicated bond than Marcy just always praising Sasha, and Sasha kind of reveling in that praise as she does. So that is a big reason why I want to see Sasha be the one who's there taking Marcy's body back to Wardwood and trying to revive it with the help of the Wardwoodians, especially Maddie. There are a couple other reasons, though. For instance, I want to see how the Wardwoodians really react to Sasha. She did do a lot of horrible things to them back near the end of Season 1, and I want to see them try and reckon with the idea that they might want to help her. Especially since she's just trying to revive Marcy, whom they have mixed feelings about at best, based on what we saw back in New Wardwood. I want to see some Wardwoodian opposition to Sasha, but I want to see Sasha fight through that. and demonstrate that, yeah, she is not just a manipulator. She really does care deeply about her friends and will do anything for them. And she's less prideful now and less hurt by people not being willing to trust her. I mean, that kind of stuff innately hurts, but I think Sasha is going to prove herself willing to fight through that. And that would be really great to see in terms of her growth throughout this third season as a person. Now, none of this is to say we should completely ignore Anne. Anne is important to the show. She is our protagonist, after all. The dark humor lover in me would love to see scenes in Earth split between Marcy's death hanging very much heavily in Anne's mind, and Anne trying to process that grief, contrasted against the planters being dorks and being so fascinated by Earth technology. Although hopefully the planters, who have experienced some grief themselves, would at least try to help Anne process Marcy's death. And yes, I think the focus on Sasha would mean that we see Marcy and the planters slightly less than in the previous 2 seasons, but that's fine. The show is not only about Anne. It has demonstrated again and again at its best that it's about all 3 of these girls and the bonds between them and their attempts to repair and strengthen those bonds. And we already know all there is to know about Anne. You know, her fears, her anxieties, her longings. There are a few other things I want to see regarding Anne, especially I want to see her contemplate whether she made the right decisions near the end of True Colors. Should she have tried to talk to Marcy a little more, not just brushed off Marcy's suggestion that they should stay here permanently? Should she have tried to listen to Sasha a little more, even though she really has all these antagonistic feelings towards Sasha? Because if she had, they wouldn't have been in this situation. So I do want to see some Anne still, but Marcy and Sasha are as important to the show as Anne, and they have not gotten as much focus. And because of that, and because their characters are so interesting to me, and are in such uncertain places right now, I want to see more focus on them going forward in Season 3. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. It's a really clever show, and I'm really disappointed to see Disney screwing it over so bluntly and so overtly. It's honestly a ridiculous situation, and I can't really think of any parallels for it in the last couple of years. The closest thing, perhaps, is Nickelodeon screwing over The Legend of Korra. And while I wouldn't say the Amphibia situation is quite that bad, it is pretty bad, and I really hope it doesn't get worse. I really hope Rowley and his team are able to bring us their full vision for Season 3, and I really feel so bad for what's happened to them. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming relatively quickly, I promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.